council to order. Please rise for the prayer and pledge of allegiance. Our Father, who art in heaven, as a body we congregate in this council chamber, we pray for thy divine guidance that we may do all things well according to thy holy will. Amen. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall.
Here.
Mr. Gabbard.
Here.
Mr. Geraci.
Here.
Mr. Kelch.
Here.
Mr. DiNardo. Mr. Thompson.
Here.
Mr. Braden.
Here.
We have 6 members present this evening. Item E, amendment of agenda. This evening we are going to remove H2, Parks, Recreation, and Public Spaces Committee report until next time. That's the only change I have this evening. We have a motion. Mr. Thompson?
Motion we amend the agenda as you stated.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Second by Mr. Brady. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yes.
Mr. Geraci.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. The motion carries. Item F, minutes of previous meeting. We don't have any this evening. That brings us to item G, request to address council on agenda items. We do have one request this evening. Ms. Deb Robinson.
I have to state my name and...
You can speak your name and address.
So I can,
you have 5 minutes. Thank
okay.
you.
I'm Deb Robinson, 2048 Maple Avenue. So I just have a few things to remarks. Norwood is a proud community. One area that Norwood stands out is in the way that we love, care for, and support our young people. It really doesn't matter if you're a straight-A student, an athlete, someone who causes a little bit of trouble, developmentally disabled, a member of the band, or the child of a legacy family. We blast the message that you are loved and cared for here. You are a member of our tribe. Imagine the message that establishing June as Pride Month would send to a young person who is gay, lesbian, or transgendered. Imagine hearing from the folks who are in charge that you are part of the tribe and we value you. Our gay, lesbian, and transgendered youth need to hear this message from us. The 2017 Youth Behavioral Risk Survey conducted by the CDC found that gay and lesbian youth were more likely to experience sad and hopeless feelings, 63% compared to 28% of heterosexual youth. And they were more likely to seriously consider suicide, 48% compared to 13% of heterosexual youth. They're also more likely to experience bullying and violence than their heterosexual peers. We know we have the remedy to help these feelings and to give hope to vulnerable young people. Connectedness is an important protective factor for youth that can reduce the likelihood of some of these risk factors. Connectedness is the sense of being cared for, supported, and belonging. Youth who feel connected at home, at school, and in their communities are less likely to experience negative health outcomes. If there is one thing we do well here in Norwood, it is connect with, care for, and support our young people. Adopting this resolution this evening telegraphs the message to our youth and to the whole community that we care about and support all people in our Norwood tribe.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Moving on to item H1, Housing, Health, and Public Safety Committee report. Mr. Geraci.
To the Honorable Council of the City of Norwood, Ohio, we, your Committee of Housing, Health, and Public Safety, to whom was referred an ordinance, discussion on an ordinance for a chronic nuisance within the City of Norwood, Building Department fee increase, State Auditor list, and the internal audit of the Water Department. Beg leave to submit the following report. Ordinance for chronic nuisance was tabled pending changes to be made. We'll discuss this at a second meeting. Approved and wish to report out building department fee increases. And we would like a letter be sent to the Safety Service Director advising him that we are approving the fees to be increased at the building department. We were unable to conclude the auditor's list until policy and procedure has been completed through the agency that's completing those at the time, and I spoke with Mayor Schneider regarding this. He will come back to it at a second meeting as soon as those get completed and handed to us. Let's see, internal audit of the water department. The structure was laid out and Councilman Kelch developed a survey for all the residents of receiving their blue cards for this month and next month.
Thank you, Mr. Geraci. May I have a motion to receive and file the report? Motion by Mr. Kelch, second by Mr. Thompson. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunsell.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yes.
Mr. Geraci.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. Moving on to item I1, third readings of ordinances and resolutions. Item I1, ordinance amending Norwood Codified Ordinance 373.01D to adopt the Idaho law as it pertains to the operation of bicycles in the city of Norwood, Ohio. Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move that we have the third reading of this ordinance.
Mr. Geraci.
I'll second the motion.
Second. We have a motion by Mr. Bonsall. Any discussion?
Who was the second?
Mr. Geraci.
Thank you.
Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunsell.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yes.
Mr. Geraci.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. The motion carries. May we please have the third reading?
Ordinance amending Norwood Codified Ordinance 373.01 subsection D to adopt the Idaho law as it pertains to the operation of bicycles in the city of Norwood, Ohio.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. May I have a motion? Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move that we pass the ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Bonsall. Second by Mr. Braden. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunsell.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yes.
Mr. Geraci.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. Motion carries. Moving on to item I2. Ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Safety Service to enter into a contract under the Houston-Galveston Area Collective Joint Purchasing Program with 911 Fleet and Fire Equipment for the purchase of 2021 Seagrave fire engine. Mr. Thompson.
I actually would like to make a motion that we pass the previous ordinance. We only did a motion to do the third reading.
Did a motion to pass, Bonsall?
We did? I'm sorry. I'm getting messed up by not having Mr. DiNardo here.
Yeah. I appreciate your diligence, though, in wanting to make sure.
I'm sorry about that.
That's okay.
I would motion to have the third reading of the next ordinance, please.
Motion by Mr. Thompson. Second by Mr. Kelch. Any discussion? No discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunsell.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yes.
Mr. Geraci.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, ma'am.
That's it.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. May we please have the third reading?
Ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Safety Service to enter into a contract under the Houston-Galveston Area Council HGAC Cooperative Purchasing Program with 911 Fleet and Fire Equipment for the financing and purchase of a 2021 Seagrave fire engine and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mr. Brady.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that we pass this ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Brady. Second by Mr. Geraci. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunsell.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yes.
Mr. Geraci.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Brady.
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. Item J1, second reading of ordinances, resolutions. Resolution declaring city personal property to be surplus property and authorizing the disposition of that property consistent with the contract with Hamilton County, Ohio. Mr. Gabbard.
I'd like to make a motion that we have the second and third reading.
Second and third reading. Mr. Kelch.
I'd like to make second.
Second by Mr. Kelch. Any discussion? Please have the second. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunsell.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yes.
Mr. Geraci.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Brady.
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. May we have the second, third reading?
Resolution declaring city personal property to be surplus property and authorizing the disposition of that property consistent with the contract with Hamilton County, Ohio. Resolution declaring city personal property to be surplus property and authorizing the disposition of that property consistent with the contract with Hamilton County, Ohio.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mr. Gabbard.
I'd like to make a motion we pass this ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Gabbard. Mr. Brady.
Second.
Second by Mr. Brady. Any discussion? Mr. Gabbard.
Just a quick reminder for the folks at home. We have several vehicles that are currently down at Public Works that are, they may work, they may not, kind of thing. This is a way for the city that we, earlier in the year, we bought into this Hampton County group purchasing, and also part of that is a website that we can place these items on for auction, and it allows us to get rid of these vehicles that are just taking up space down at Public Works, and allows the city to get a few bucks for them. So if anyone's interested, we can get the we can have maybe the website.
It's right there.
Is it currently on there?
Yeah.
It's one of the whereases.
It's one of the whereases. Oh, there he is. www.hamiltoncountyOhioauction.com. Once again, that's HamptonCountyOhioauction.com, all one word. You can go there, check out these vehicles if you're interested, or other vehicles from other places, or even items. So just for the public's information, that's what this is all about. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gabbard. Any further discussion? We have a motion by Mr. Gabbard, second by Mr. Braden. Have the second, third reading of the resolution. Please call the roll.
We did the second and third. The motion was to pass it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Bunsell?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. The motion carries. Moving on to item K, introductory readings of ordinance and resolutions. K1, resolution declaring June 2020 to be Pride Month in the city of Norwood. Motion by Mr. Thompson, second by Mr. Gabbard.
I would move we have all three readings.
Oh, I'm sorry.
For the first reading in its entirety, please.
Okay. Motion by Mr. Thompson, second by Mr. Gabbard, to suspend the rules and have all three readings. The first reading in its entirety.
In its entirety,
second
please.
and third by caption.
Yep.
Thank you. You second.
I second it.
Okay. Any discussion? Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, brought this resolution today. first line of this resolution says, Norwood is home to a diverse and inclusive community. And that is absolutely true. Part of being a diverse and inclusive community means recognizing our LGBTQ, the members of our community. There are our friends, our family members, there are co-workers and our neighbors and our students. And they form a very integral and very important part of our community. In Ohio is still one of 29 states that leaves out LGBTQ people from laws that make discrimination illegal. In Ohio, you can still be fired for being gay. You can still be denied housing for being transgender. You can still be denied normal services from a business for any of those reasons. So there's still a lot of work to do on bringing equality for this group of people, but this ordinance that we have here today, declaring June to be Pride Month for Norwood, is a small step that we can take to help welcome and let the LGBTQ community in Norwood know that we value and appreciate them and are here to support them.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Any further discussion? Mr. Gabbard.
I'd like to thank Mr. Thompson for bringing this resolution to us. I couldn't agree more. Excuse me. Let me start by saying that you don't have to agree with this lifestyle, but we should respect and love without boundaries and without judgment. Regardless of their age, this is just a small gesture that we can say to a community that we have within our citizenship that you're a Norwoodian, and we're proud of that, regardless of who you are, what color, what shape, what size, what nationality, what religion, or what lifestyle you live. You're still cared for, and we're not here to judge, and that you are loved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gabbard. Any further discussion?
Mr. President.
Mr. Bonsall.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I did want to just note that we, as council, Mr. DiNardo had a pre-scheduled engagement, and he was not able to be here, but he did send an email to council just expressing his support and expressing that he would have voted yes on the resolution. I do think that it is important that we do the 3 readings today so that the resolution can be passed and ready by June 1st. You know, even if, somebody can still vote to do all 3 readings, even if they might vote no to pass it, just so that, there at least can be some resolution to this. It's a very non-binding type of resolution. It shouldn't be very controversial to do the 3 readings, so I would just encourage council to do that, because it will take all 6 of us to have all 3 readings today.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. Motion carries.
Resolution declaring June 2020 to be Pride Month in the city of Norwood. Whereas Norwood is home to a diverse and inclusive community, and whereas individuals who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer, LGBTQ, include people from all faiths, races, national origins, socioeconomic statuses, education levels, and political beliefs. And whereas LGBTQ people in the United States have made and continue to make vital contributions to the United States and to the world in every aspect, including in the fields of education, law, health, business, science, research, economic development, architecture, law enforcement, healthcare, fashion, sports, government, military, music, film, politics, technology, literature, and civil rights. And whereas on June 26, 2015, the Supreme Court of the United States ruled in Obergefell versus Hodges, 135, Supreme Court 2584, that same-sex couples have a constitutional right to marry, and acknowledged that no union is more profound than marriage, for it embodies the highest ideals of love, fidelity, devotion, sacrifice, and family. And whereas LGBTQ people in the United States have fought for equal treatment, dignity, and respect. And whereas LGBTQ people in the United States have achieved significant milestones, ensuring that future generations of LGBTQ people in the United States will enjoy a more equal and just society. Now therefore be it resolved by the Council of the City of Norwood, State of Ohio, that Section 1, the City of Norwood declares June 2020 as Pride Month, to provide an opportunity for our residents to learn about the discrimination and inequality that the LGBTQ community has experienced and continues to experience, and to celebrate the contributions of the LGBTQ community. Resolution declaring June 2020 to be Pride Month in the City of Norwood. Resolution declaring June 2020 to be Pride Month in the City of Norwood.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mr. Thompson.
I move that we pass the resolution.
Motion by Mr. Thompson. May I have a second? Mr. Gabbard.
Second.
Any further discussion? Mr. Kelch.
Thank you, Mr. President. So this is an issue that so it came up, and I figured it'd be a little controversial, but I would like to commend Mr. Thompson and Mr. Gabbard for fighting for this. It's not personally a lifestyle that I agree with and I choose to live, but there's things that we all do that other people probably wouldn't do or would disagree with. So, you know, I feel like it is important that we do recognize everybody in our community as a whole, and I'm just want to commend you guys for fighting for this. I think it's very honorable. So,
thank you, Mr. Kelch. Mr. Tracy.
I'll echo Mr. Kelch as well. I do appreciate you guys bringing this to the table. While I don't live that lifestyle, and you know, I do have friends who are part of the community as well. It kind of, you know, to me seems like, you know, what other groups should we be recognizing? What other groups should we be giving months to, and where do we stop? I mean, I understand it, and I get why this motion was brought to the table. I'm again not voting against it. Doesn't, you know, I may disagree a little bit with it, and I think that what has been done is absolutely fantastic. Things were fought for. Good stuff was done. I just, you know, I think that there's national recognition, there's state recognition. To do it at a local level, it just, and for me to be talking, I guess, is kind of, I don't know how to put this, but I think that a lot of it has, I'm at a loss for words, I guess, right now, but I'm done, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Tracy?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Brader?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to item K2, ordinance authorizing the mayor and the Safety Service Director to sign an environmental covenant document for the Tareq Harris Avenue LLC office redevelopment site on Harris Avenue west of Forest Avenue and declaring an emergency. Mr. Thompson.
Recommend we have the first reading of this ordinance.
Mr. Thompson, you made a motion to have one reading? I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson, was that to have the first reading? Okay. Mr. Dracy.
I'll second that.
We have a motion by Mr. Thompson, second by Mr. Dracy to have the first reading. Any discussion? Mr. Gabbard?
Again, do we know who submitted this?
Yeah, at the very end, there's one of those resolution sheets. It's the very last page.
Oh, my.
Okay, sorry. That's on the...
Who did?
Oh, Mr. Gary. It's on Gary's end.
It's the last page, Mr. Gabbard.
All right, it just wasn't on my archive.
Mr. Brayton.
Thank you, Mr. President. Is there any way Mr. Snyder can give us an overview? Are you aware of this and maybe got something to say to enlighten us a little bit?
Mayor Snyder.
Sure, absolutely. This ordinance was brought to me by Tim Gary, the Assistant Law Director, and is required for us to move forward. It's probably a better question to go to the Law Director.
Thank you. Thank you.
He could help with that,
Certainly.
if you don't mind.
That's fine. I'll change my motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Tareq redevelopment Zumbiel box, what that site was, the building's been torn down. They've been working to get it construction ready, and part of that, the city owns what used to be Harris Avenue there. They have a temporary easement over that to get the site construction ready, but part of the issue is they want to get all the environmental issues cleaned up. There's not really much of an issue there, but in order to move forward, the EPA is saying, okay, but you can't build single-family homes there. You can't put a daycare center there. You have to, it's got to be office, it's got to be paved, it has to be, so there's requirements there. And this is an agreement between Tareq and the city and the Ohio EPA that says the Ohio EPA is not going to sue us if we follow those conditions. And that's what this is. It's very straightforward. It's a pretty common kind of thing. We have a similar sort of arrangement with some other sites in Norwood that were originally manufacturing sites. So it's something that just needs to happen before we can move forward and before Tareq can move forward with the rest of the project.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Mr. Dracy.
I guess through the chair to the law director, seems to have a little bit of information on this. Does this mean that something is going to be developed anytime soon over there? It's been sitting there for at least 2 years, I believe, completely vacant.
Mr. Moore?
I know that they would like to. My policy's always been I don't believe it until I see the steel go up. But I know that they've been actively marketing it. They've been actively talking to potential tenants or build-to-suit office owners, potential office building owners. But I can't tell you that if as soon as this is passed, they're going to start construction on something. I'm not aware of that kind of a situation.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Mr. Brady.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through the chair to the law department question, I do remember this coming in front of us a few years. They actually had a plan, and they figured out that there was some sort of drainage running through that property that they actually had to scoot the building over. Can you tell us about that, or is there anything more about that? Or do I remember that correctly? There was some sort of drainage that the city owned and they wanted to build, and they had to scoot it over because of that. Maybe you can give us a little more details on that or not.
As I recall, yeah, the city has sewer lines, storm sewer lines that go through there. There's water lines that go through the city right-of-way there. Whether anything in particular has to be moved depends on the footprint of what they want to put in there. If they want to put in the footprint they kind of originally thought, which would cover a big part of what was Harris Avenue, yeah, somebody's going to have to rearrange all of those utilities or take them out, because I'm not sure what all they connect to other than what they used to go to the Zumbiel site. But the specifics of that, I honestly couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Anyone else? Did you have something? Mayor Stein?
I do, but
Go ahead, sir.
you might recall that the subway tunnels used to go right under that site.
Yes, sir.
So the subway tunnels were filled, but there were sewer lines that ran through the subway lines, there were utility lines that ran through the subway lines at one time. So there are some challenges with development of that site. They have brought some renderings of some really nice building that they would like to put in there, but it is taking time to sell it out and get some things in place. This is just a step ahead in the right direction for opening it up and moving on with that process.
Thank you, Mayor Schneider. Anyone else? Mr. Thompson?
I suggest we have the first reading, but to your knowledge, is this a time-sensitive request?
Mr. Moore?
I'm not 100% sure on that, no. I don't really know.
Thank you.
I don't think it will matter.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I will just say Mr. Gary did check that he would like it to have all 3 readings, just so that the document can be recorded at the earliest possible time. I mean, I think it's, the council's will, but Mr. Gary did request it at the time.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Mr. Thompson?
I'll revise my motion to be all 3 readings then.
Okay, Mr. Thompson revising his motion to have all 3 readings. Mr. Dracy, would you like to revise your motion, sir?
Sure. Yes.
Mr. Dracy? Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Butzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the motion carries. Mrs. Williams, may we have all 3 readings?
Ordinance authorizing the mayor and/or service safety director to sign an environmental covenant document for the Tareq Harris Avenue LLC office redevelopment site on Harris Avenue, west of Forest Avenue, and declaring an emergency. Ordinance authorizing the mayor and/or service safety director to sign an environmental covenant document for the Tareq Harris Avenue LLC office redevelopment site on Harris Avenue, west of Forest Avenue, and declaring an emergency. Ordinance authorizing the mayor and/or service safety director to sign an environmental covenant document for the Tareq Harris Avenue LLC office redevelopment site on Harris Avenue, west of Forest Avenue, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. May I have a motion? Mr. Braden?
I'll make a motion that the ordinance be passed.
Motion by Mr. Braden. Mr. Bonsall?
I'd like to second that.
Second by Mr. Bonsall. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. Motion passes.
I'm very enthusiastic.
Item L, administrative reports. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I'll try to get the oxygen level up and a little enthusiasm going here, see if we can wake everybody up. You guys have been slow on the draw today. I'm not sure what that's about, but I've got some interesting stuff to talk about. I mean, the COVID-19 stuff continues. I don't know that I really need to go into that every time. I will talk a little bit about the swimming pool, the municipal swimming pool. We are still putting plans in place to activate the swimming pool. Do we have everything figured out and a start date figured out exactly for that? No, but we know the bather load, we know the load for the deck load that we can have. We know we're going to have to limit potentially some participation at the pool to make sure that we're not overwhelming those loads that are there now. But it is dynamic and changing all the time, and there's different interesting information coming out. We know that we've got lifeguards that have been trained up and that are qualified. We've checked all of their certifications. Their Red Cross certifications have been vetted. So we know we've got a good core group of people that can do it. We've got a pool manager that's ready to go. Public Works has already started doing some stuff. So we still plan on, I look at this and say that we are very much a urban city and we need our municipal pool going. I think that the clerk of council gave me a little grief and said she's really looking forward to her children maybe being able to go there when it's hot this summer. It was almost 90 degrees today. But so we are still moving in that direction. I do not have a set date for when the swimming pool will open, but my goal is to have the swimming pool open this summer, maybe under some new stuff, so no big deal there. Grants, we are working on grants. We're working on the Norwood lateral lights, has been something that continually comes up. If you look around Montgomery Road, if you look at Sherman Avenue, if you look around the city, streetlights are operating again. A lot of the streetlights that were out along Montgomery Road are back up. There's new poles that are being set in place. John Murphy has worked with Duke, and they're putting things in place, and we're getting that going. We are also putting plans in place to get the Norwood lateral lights back in action. A lot of that is underground wires. A lot of that is really rethinking how we're doing this and trying to get grant money to leverage the money that we have for that project to make it even better. So we're working on that, and then we're also working on some guardrail grants and different things there. The big cleanup on the lateral was a huge success, but you can look right now and see there's litter back out there. It's the small stuff. The guys can get out there and get the bigger stuff, but we've really got to look at how we trim and what we do to maintain the lateral long term. So we're trying to address some of those issues also. The police department, we've got quotes in for painting the police department. We actually even have a person within the city that said they would pay for the paint if we came up with the scheme. Originally, we were just going to repaint the police department the color it is, but then I was told we really need to look at that as a potential for doing something that makes it look a little nicer. So we're looking at some different paint schemes for the police department, and we'll see what happens there. Murph has been working on all the HVAC systems and trying to get things in place and make sure that all that stuff's working too. So that's an interesting part. City Hall roof, Murph is working on gutter. There's some problems with gutters. There are many more problems than originally anticipated, which is, I guess, typical of older buildings. But he's working on some roofing quotes and on some of the membrane, the flat area quotes, and trying to really tackle that one. He's also working on some quotes for new windows. We've got to work on getting the bricks and all the masonry work closed up on the front of City Hall. Even as you walk up the main steps, there are plants that are growing out of some of the mortar joints that we need to take care of. And then we've got to close up, and one of the things we have to close up is where the time capsule was taken out of the corner of the building. It looks like a car hit the building, but we've got to get that closed up. We'd like to do all that masonry work at the same time and get the time capsule closed back in. So those are different things. The Firehouse Roof is also another thing that's being worked on. I think the bid opening for that, and you remember that when we do this, it's a closed bid process, meaning they've got to put their bid package together. They bring it into City Hall. They all get opened at the same time. There's no favoritism. There's no sharing information, and then we make a decision based off that. So that is still moving forward. We discussed the ordinance on the surplus property disposal. I think I talked at the last council meeting and said that the auditorium upstairs is pretty much filled with that stuff. The Hamilton County just released the guy who comes out and takes pictures and sort of coordinates that. The website's up. You can still go to the website that Councilman Gabbard mentioned. There are plenty of things on there to buy, but once Norwood stuff gets on there, there's going to be quite a bit more because we've got quite a bit to go on there. So that's moving forward. The city of Norwood is going to start putting out a quarterly newsletter. The newsletter will go out June 1st. It's an email blast. So we've already put together the newsletter. Most of it is done. We've got about 250 to 275 emails that we've been collecting up. Hopefully we'll collect up more and you'll share those, so all of you will receive it. And then hopefully you will share it with others and they'll see that and they will send us their email and we'll build that up even more. So we'd like to take that up. That's June 1st. July 1st we will be kicking off our website. It is really taking shape and it looks great. One of the nice things that right up front on that first page is a click button where you can click to it and it'll take you to go pay a parking ticket. And you can click on it and it'll take you to the water department so you can pay your water bill. And we'll have a community calendar right at the front. So there's going to be plenty to do with this website and I really think you guys will be happy with it. that's another thing that's going on. We have the Personnel Policies and Procedures Manual is underway now. We are utilizing Clemens & Nelson, which is the law firm that helps the city. They're the legal advisors for the city when it comes to our contract negotiations with the union membership and with the city. One of their guys is working on this Policies and Procedure manual for us. We're a statutory city, which makes it, and I don't know if it's easier or harder. If you're a statutory city, it might be a little easier for them because there's more of a template. But we already received, actually, we had a conference call where all four of I'll call them the big four were there. So we actually had the law director and we had the treasurer and the auditor and myself on a conference call so we could sort of help him understand what we're trying to get, and him helping us, Clemens Nelson helping us understand, well, here's what he will produce for us. So that is the start of a Policies and Procedures Manual for the City of Norwood. It's part of something that President Miracles has on his agenda for our fiscal recovery. This has to be completed. We have to have this done to get out of the fiscal emergency. So we're making good progress there, and that's an important part of it. One of the last things, and one of the things that I'm most excited about, is that Tom Perry has been working, looking and vetting a couple of different software applications. One that we really think is very promising is called See-Click Fix. So see, meaning if you see a pothole, you get your phone, you click a picture of it, you type in a few things of where it's at, and it automatically goes into Public Works. It's a database with all that information right there. It's an app on your phone. It's not really, from initial stuff on it, it's not super expensive. There's a couple of other communities, I think Covington and I think Mount Healthy are using it right now, but it's a national database. But if we can get that thing going, I think that really puts us light years ahead on not just, for understanding where the potholes are and getting them fixed, but also for helping people, a feedback, a loop back that says, we recognize that pothole's there, we filled it, it's fixed, now let's move on, not come to city council and say you blew out a tire and you need a new rim and $500. So that's something that I'm sort of excited about. So we've got a lot of good things going on at City Hall that are sort of coming your way, and they're all, a lot of them are ideas that you guys have shot out at us and said we need to do, and we're working on it. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Schneider. Moving on, item M, other requests to address council. We don't have any. On to item N, unfinished business.
Can we ask the mayor a question?
No, I'm sorry. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's your moment. It's okay.
Mr. Gabbard.
All right. Thanks. Mr. Mayor, first of all, the last thing you mentioned here about potholes, I had Public Works, I noticed was out on my street and some of the other streets today filling potholes. I really appreciate that. I know it's difficult for them right now. Today actually happened to be a day we didn't have some, downpour, that they could actually get out there and do some things like that. So it's great to see. And for the rest of our people, our Public Works they are out there every day doing what they can, and just want to give them a shout out and tell them thank you. Follow up?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, earlier right after we started in January, I had sent you an email in regards to developing a task force, either yourself or directing the Safety Service Director to form a task force which would incorporate law department, building department, police department, fire department, and health department, all of which would have a representative that once a week they each bring troubled properties that they have that have come to their department, or that they're made aware of. And I'm sure each of those departments have more than a handful of properties that they've either made extensive runs to, had problems with, had complaints about, but they would be able to go as a team, and maybe even with Tom Perry as kind of a coordinator, that they could go as a team stand in front of these properties and visually talk about, you know, what's going on here, what's the problems, and then how do we start a process of getting them resolved. And we probably have some nuisance properties that we can get a process started on, or at least start paperwork in that way. The reason I say a task force like that is because I think oftentimes the police department makes several runs to a property, the fire department is making several runs at a property, the building department's getting some complaints, and the health department's been called about, you know, a couple different items, but neither of them, it doesn't get coordinated into one spot where they all know, wow, this really is a problem. And we have several areas in the city that I'm sure that each of the council people and the administration themselves have heard about and have had calls and emails about. So just wanted to encourage you about that as well, if we could get that started. You said to touch base back with you later on, because, you know, we were just coming in the office, and then obviously we got hit with COVID here, but something I just want to put back on your radar, if we could form that, I think that it would be very beneficial. We did have something like that several years ago when you and I were on council, when we were much younger, and just like to get that kind of that task force reunited, I guess we'd say. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Anyone else? Mr. Kelch?
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a question for the mayor. It wasn't your report, but I was hoping we spoke earlier about it. I was hoping you'd give an update on the Elm Avenue storm sewer situation and where we're at in that process.
Yeah, I did have communication with engineering, with JMA, and one of the challenges has been getting information from MSD right now with the COVID-19, and I know it seems like we're blaming everything on that, but the first start in that process was trying to get the historical background on what was designed, what can be designed, what went on in previous times. So they're still chasing that down. I guess when you look at the scheme of things, 2 months is not a very long time for an engineering group, but it seems like a long time to us, especially when it comes to that project. And then with all the flood, it seems like I'm getting flood alerts constantly on my phone. So all of those definitely bring it to the forefront for us and for the Elm Avenue people. I know Public Works has been over there and trying to take care of and really trying to be visibly present through all this time to make sure that, you know, to as much as they can assure people that we're taking care of the catch basins and stuff. I think there was a tree removed from one of the areas. There were some problems. But yeah, I will touch base with JMA again. I mean, it was just in the last 3 days that they sent me there, well, it was right before the weekend when they sent me the email saying MSD is sort of taking a little longer, but we'll bring that to the front again, absolutely.
Thank you.
Mr. Gabbard.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sure you just forgot, but you might want to just mention again about our census, or the census, I should say.
Yeah, absolutely. The census is ongoing, and please, all the residents, we ask you to please fill out your census information. Hopefully you're not still receiving the little cards, because they are relentless. And if you know, realize that if you do not fill out your census information, they have people that will be out beating the streets later on, and they'll be knocking on your door, you know, twisting your arm as much as they can. But it's easier it's very easy to do online, and please do participate in the census. A lot of federal funding, a lot of funding that can come into the city of Norwood is based upon our population, and quite frankly, you know, the amount of money that we make in the city, the money that each of our incomes for the families bring in. So it is important information, and it can help the city of Norwood in the long run. They only do this once every 10 years, so we hope that it is done right now, and we need participation. We need our citizens to really step up and spend just a few minutes to get the information in there.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Anyone else? Thank you, Mayor Schneider. Moving on to item M, other requests to address council. We don't have any this evening. Item N, unfinished business. Do we have any unfinished business? Mr. Geraci.
I guess this one I'll put out there to the mayor. I would like to make sure that we are at least in communication with the parade board to make sure that that still is something that comes to this city this year. To make sure that we have that parade this year. I think having that, it'll bring a sense to the residents of some sort of normalcy. And I know you don't make the decision on the parade, but I would hope that you would have a little bit of clout, maybe some sort of pull to where you can tell them that at least one council member would like to see the parade continue on.
Thank you, Mr. Geraci. Any other unfinished business? Mr. Thompson.
I've been asked to remind everybody that Norwood Day at Coney has been canceled for this year due to the COVID-19.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Anyone else? Thank you. We'll move on to item O, new business. Is there any new business? Mr. Geraci.
I have a lot of new business. Hopefully nobody hits on it, but if they do, they do. The first one I'll start with is I'd like a letter from the clerk sent to the mayor requesting that a start date or an open date for the pool be concluded by at least this Friday. So that way residents have knowledge of when a start date's going to be. I'm under the understanding that June 8th has been kind of put out by the state as a start date for all pools to open up. And I understand we're not going to be able to open up for a little while anyway due to cleaning and sanitizing or whatever else needs to happen as far as checks. But I would request that we at least be notified by Friday of an opening date for the pool.
Any further new business? Mr. Geraci.
This new business, I'd like to go through the chair to the mayor to find out if we have any updates on this Quality Hotel. And if not, I would like a letter be sent to the mayor requesting that we find out, Mayor and Safety Service Director, to find out if we can have some sort of update on the Quality Hotel and what's going on with it. It's an eyesore. It's in the center of our city, which is absolutely horrendous, and we need to start taking care of business with some of these places that are vacant within the core of Norwood.
Thank you, Mr. Geraci. Anyone else? Any further new business? Mr. Geraci.
I would also like a letter sent to the Safety Service Director requesting contact with Greater Cincinnati Waterworks to find out why we're having such an issue with our sewer system at this point. I can tell you I've lived in my house for 3 years now, and I've had backups in my basement twice now, most recently this week. And, you know, not even thinking, you know, just looking at Elm Avenue area and things like that, I'm not dealing with what they're dealing with. However, it seems to be a problem when Greater Cincinnati Waterworks comes out, looks at the sewer and says, oh, yeah, the water was high, and walks away. So I'd like a letter sent requesting some sort of advice from Greater Cincinnati Waterworks as to what they're going to do to resolve the problem of sewer backups.
Mr. Chair, Mr. President.
Mr. Bonson.
I just wanted to note maybe that it might adjust Mr. Geraci's request, but the Greater Cincinnati Waterworks doesn't handle the sewers. They handle the water, like the water coming in. So I guess he probably wants to have it sent
MSD.
to
Sorry
MSD.
about that. my fault.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Any further new business? Mr. Bonsall?
Sorry, I just had a real quick question. I didn't catch Mr. DeRacy on the second one with Quality Hotel. Am I sending a letter to the mayor on that one too?
The Mayor and Safety Service Director, yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
thank you. My apologies.
Mr. Bonsall?
Thank you, Mr. President. So I just wanted to reach out. I had Mary C. Miller from Norwood Together kind of reach out with some of the things that they're working on doing. The first one is they're holding a sidewalk drawing contest for Norwood children. A picture of the drawing along with the child's first name can be emailed to norwoodtogether@gmail.com. That's norwoodtogether@gmail.com before May 31st. The winner is going to receive a $30 gift card to Indian Mound Cafe. And if a child doesn't have chalk or they need chalk, if they just email that norwoodtogether@gmail.com, they can get chalk to the child as well. And then if anyone needs welcome bags for new neighbors, they can also email the Norwood Together at gmail.com, or you can message Norwood Together on Facebook with the number of bags they would like and their address. They can personalize the bags with some candy or personal note, and then they can safely hang them on their new neighbor's doors. So they just wanted to make sure to express that to the council and let us know about that.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall.
Yep.
Is there any other new business before council? Mr. Tracy?
I just wanted to advise that later in this week, I'll be emailing the members of the Law and Ordinance Committee to find out if we can have a date set up for a meeting under some various items that have been tabled or haven't been discussed in a while. And also, same thing goes with the Housing Committee meeting. I'll have an email out later this week to those members requesting dates for a meeting. The reason I'm doing that is my schedule seems to be week by week instead of what they're doing. So I won't find out my next schedule until Friday. And the last thing, and I'll make this my last thing real quick, I'm sorry.
You're fine.
This one's going to be towards the chair, I guess. Are we going to be holding a committee of the whole meeting sometime soon? I know there were several items a couple months ago that were thrown into the agenda there. I didn't know if we were going to hold a committee of the whole meeting anytime soon.
I plan on having one in first part of June, so I'm going to be sending out an email to everyone and see if we can get...
I wanted to kind of try and figure that out so that I wasn't walking over top of any of the meetings.
Okay.
All right, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. So I just wanted to let residents know, I think it was last year that we passed some ordinances related to a residential PACE program. So essentially, PACE is like the energy improvement district where people can basically make improvements on their commercial properties and have that added essentially to their property taxes for a set period of time in the future. And at the time, people would ask, well, hey, how can residents do that as well? So last year we did pass some legislation on that through the Toledo Port Authority, is who's kind of managing the state, the residential PACE for the state. And they are still, a few residents have reached out to them to try to get contact to get moving forward, and they haven't heard as much back. I did reach out to the Port Authority earlier this week, last week, and they are still waiting to start the program. So the program has not started. So I just want to let residents know if you were wanting to participate in that. And residents can participate. If they're replacing windows at their house, if they're replacing maybe even a roof, there's a lot of different things that could qualify in this program. And it basically just puts a special assessment on their property taxes for a period of time. And the interest rate is relatively low as well on that. So anyways, if residents do want to learn more, well, just reach out to me, and I will also update this council when they do start the program up so that residents can participate in it. But we are one of a certain number of communities in Ohio that have already, we're ready to go when they are, and I'm sure other communities in Ohio will participate as well once the program gets started, but Norwood's definitely ahead of the curve right now.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall.
Yep.
Mr. Kelch.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd just like to put out that, so we're working on a Lisa Tan Memorial Park project in the Parks Committee, and we decided we were going to open that up to some fundraising. We talked about that. And a close family friend started a GoFundMe account and has shared that. I know it's on my political page. I think a couple other people shared it, and it's in a Tanner Strong relief page. I'd like to say we opened this up. It was actually the citizen, the friend. And we thought it'd be a good idea to give the community members, friends, family, the opportunity to contribute to the help of creating this park and kind of have their hand in its creation. So I'd like to encourage people, if they would like to donate that, to try to find that link, and I will definitely share it again on my page, and it's definitely floating around out there. So I just want to kind of put that out.
Thank you, Mr. Kelch.
Thank you.
Mr. Thompson.
Question from Mr. Kelch, if you could email that link to the rest of us so we can share it out for it too.
Yes, definitely.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Any further new business? Thank you. Moving on to item P, communications. P1, letter from Mayor Schneider.
Letter dated May 6, 2020, to Julie D. Collinsworth, appointment to Norwood Tax Board of Appeals. Dear Ms. Collinsworth, this letter is to confirm your appointment to the Norwood Tax Board of Appeals. Your term will begin immediately and will expire on December 31st, 2020. Thank you for accepting this position, and I look forward to working with you in the future. Sincerely, Victor Schneider, Mayor, City of Norwood.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. May I have a motion to receive and file? Mr. Braden?
A motion to receive and file.
Thank you, sir. May I have a second? Mr. Gabbard? Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. Motion carries. Item P2, letter from Mayor Schneider.
Letter dated May 6th of 2020 to Mr. Ken Miracle, President of Council, Mr. Michael Gabbard, Chair of Economic Development Committee, and Mr. Bernie Sewer, I apologize if I pronounced that incorrectly, Chair of Board of Zoning Appeals, regarding Norwood Fire Code Appeals Board. Dear gentlemen, this letter is to inform you that you are a member of the Norwood Fire Code Appeals Board per Norwood Ordinance 47-2007. As mayor, I am also a member of the board, as will be the building commissioner once that position has been filled. Please be aware that though the Norwood Fire Code Appeals Board does not often receive fire code appeals, the board must meet within 30 calendar days upon receiving an appeal. Sincerely, Victor Schneider, Mayor, City of Norwood.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mr. Gabbard.
Motion to receive and file.
Motion by Mr. Gabbard to receive and file. May I have a second? Mr. Thompson. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. Motion passes. Move on to item Q, excuse absent members. Mr. Braden.
I'd like to make a motion that we excuse Mr. DiNardo.
Motion by Mr. Braden. May I have a second? Mr. Bonsall.
I'd like to second that motion.
Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. Motion carries. Item R, adjournment. Mr. Braden.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Mr. Braden to adjourn. Mr. Thompson. Second by Mr. Thompson. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
It's awful early. Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson? Yes. Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. Motion carries and we are adjourned.